Hi, I'm Sheila Kuehl. Welcome to another episode of Get Used to It. This is our holiday show, and although in the past we've talked with families in our community and talked about how we celebrate the holidays, today we have a really wonderful treat for you because I've asked three of our most active community, what shall we say, leaders of faith, to talk to us about how our community celebrates the various holidays that we celebrate and whether or not that has an impact on our community and whether our community has an impact on the way these holidays are celebrated. I'm very happy to introduce you to our guests. First, Reverend Malcolm Boyd, no stranger to this show, who's an Episcopal priest, the author of 25 books, and currently a poet, writer in residence at the Episcopal Cathedral Center in Los Angeles. Malcolm, welcome.
Thank you, Sheila.
Nice to have you here. Next, Rabbi Denise Egger, also a regular on the show, spiritual leader of Congregation Kauli'i in West Hollywood. Welcome to you, Denise.
Thank you, Sheila.
And Phil Wilson, who's going to talk to us and with us about Kwanzaa today, because we look forward to your Kwanzaa party every year, Phil, and I know it'd be wonderful to have you talk about it. Phil is the director of the AIDS Archives at the University of Southern California. Well, let's start talking in the order in which these holidays were established in the world. So we'll start with you, Denise. Talk about Hanukkah.
Hanukkah is a word that means rededication, and approximately in the year 165 BCE, the story of Hanukkah began to play itself out. Judah the Maccabee, Judah the Hammer, and his family of brothers and his fathers led a revolt against the Greek Syrians who held control of the land of Israel at the time. And really it was a war about religious revolt because they didn't allow the Jewish people to worship the way that was authentic to their time. And the Greek, the Hellenized Syrians desecrated the Jewish temples and places of worship. And so Judah and his family really led the revolt, and after a 3-year guerrilla warfare campaign, reclaimed the sacred temple in Jerusalem and really led to a new era of Jewish dignity and Jewish religious freedom and in the land of Israel. So Hanukkah is a wonderful story about overcoming oppression and standing up for one's rights and fighting against the odds. It's also a story associated with miracles, because the story goes that after Judah and his family had recaptured the temple, they found it in such horrible shambles, totally trashed, and they cleaned it up, and they were going to have a wonderful rededication ceremony, and they couldn't find any sacred, special kosher oil left to rekindle the sacred menorah. And so they found one small jar. They said, "Oh, it'll be enough for the party. It'll go out. We'll have to remake it." And the story is that the light lasted for the whole 8 days of the celebration, allowing enough time to make fresh sacred oil. So there's a story of light and miracles, of overcoming oppression, and it's a wonderful, wonderful holiday, coming very late in Jewish history, as it were.
Now, why do you suppose it comes at the end of the calendar year?
Well, it comes at a time, interestingly enough, from a Jewish perspective, they were really trying to reenact the harvest festival of Sukkot, the equivalent of the Jewish Thanksgiving festival, which happens earlier in the fall, but they missed that window because they didn't have the temple then. So they they declared a holiday, and so it came at that time of year. But, cultural anthropologists tell us that the connection with the light also has to do with the dark time of the year as well. So there seems to be some kind of at least cultural connections with other winter darkness holidays at that time of year. Well, because a lot of
people in our community now, of course, celebrate winter solstice.
Yes.
Especially, I think, lesbians have enacted a lot of ritual around that. And it seems like all the holidays coinciding with the most ancient sort of celebration of not really knowing whether the sun was going to go away forever, and therefore when the days started to get longer again, there was a great celebration. And it seems like light is a real essential part of the celebrations in the,
Yes.
in the darkest part of the year.
Right. And today, if in Israel especially, people place their menorahs, their candelabrum outside their homes and it's a wonderful holiday of great light. I mean, just all of these wonderful lights reflecting outside, usually oil wick or of some sort, oil lamps. So it definitely has that connection with the darkest time of the year.
So does this have any special meaning for our community? I mean, many of your congregation are gay or lesbian people, though not all, of course.
Right.
And does this have, how do you talk about this with them?
Well, I mean, obviously the first theme, of course, is the ability to challenge the oppressor. I mean, that is the overarching theme, and to stand up for what you believe in. Despite the fact that it might be a greater army or the majority says you have to believe or behave in a certain way. That's what the Maccabees did. They challenged the state authority of its time. Of course, in that story, it was about religious oppression, how we would categorize it, but it was really about all of life, and it translated into political oppression as well. And so I think for gay and lesbian people in particular, that theme strikes a great chord, that there's hope and inspiration that in the story of Hanukkah that we can find an anchor to say that might give us inspiration to challenge oppression when we are oppressed, to stand up to the larger society, the larger political world that would say you don't have a place here, and to reclaim and rededicate, like Hanukkah means rededicate, that place for ourselves.
But it would also be a difficult time for us, wouldn't it? I mean, I'm thinking about, you mentioned Thanksgiving, and of
Yes.
course the nightmare for so many gay and lesbian people is going home for
Right.
Thanksgiving,
Right.
or not going home. It seems to me that the December holidays are sort of the real essence of the I'm not happy unless I'm happy
Right.
kind of
Right, and for many people, it's a lonely time of year. I mean, there are expectations to return to biological family, to return to the homestead. People are on breaks from school. Many factories close down during that time. People's offices often close, and so they don't know what to do with themselves. So we do find, and I'm sure that Malcolm would have seen in his pastoral work too, that there are lots of lonely people during the holiday season, and a rise in suicide rates because people are so desperate and can't get connected, which is why it's so important to find a stake, our stake, in these celebrations, and what is the ways in which we can hook in and to make family. And to find families, maybe not our biological families, but for some of us, we might not want to return to them anyways.
And that's the same for straight people. I mean,
Yes, this is not a gay lesbian. There's a lot of non-gay folks who say,
"Please, I need a new family."
Right, I have to go home and be in that environment, and we all get infantilized and do all of those things that we think we shouldn't have done, and we
have
left
to hide
in the
who
first
we
place.
really are, no matter what that is.
Right.
But do we conversely, as a community, have something to bring? I mean, rabbis who are gay or lesbian must be still quite a minority among various avatars of the faith. But I'm not sure whether there's an answer to this. But is there something especially that we have to bring to this holiday of Hanukkah as a community?
Well, I always like to think about, first of all, especially as we talk about families, that we make our own families and that we give permission in the larger world for people to articulate what their family structure is. And so I think that especially at the holiday time that's really critical. And just as much as we can find meaning in Hanukkah, I think we become a much more living example of how these holidays, these stories, these themes continue to repeat themselves through history. And so that's really, really important, that we are the living example today of why there needs to be a rededication by lots of people in the wider community to overcoming all kinds of oppression. But I also like to think about it because the story that certainly most Jewish children grew up with is the miracle of the oil story. And I like to think about it that we're the miracles, that despite or in spite of of all of the oppression, of the difficulties of coming out, that perhaps we're the light of the holiday. And that to me is very inspiring.
Malcolm, how about in the various Christian faiths? I mean, there's sort of an added thing, I guess, in the at least in the recent past, because we see so much or feel so much oppression, and it, in the Christian right, or when Christians are associated with our oppression, and yet so many of us are Christian, and we grew up celebrating Christmas. How does this holiday impact our community as you see it?
It's funny, as Denise was talking, I was remembering that I had a Christmas in Israel. I lived there for several months. And that was very interesting, not to be in the majority faith, as I always had. It was Handel's Judas Maccabeus rather than the Messiah, and all that kind of thing. As a kid, as Denise was talking, I was thinking back. Well, at the beginning, I mean, I just kind of took it all for granted. It was the majority faith. And certainly things meant something to me, but I don't think I took it into myself too much. When I went away to college, I became an atheist, or thought I did, wanted to. And I was getting rid of all the luggage in many ways, family, religion, etc. Came to work in Hollywood. And then as a young adult, suddenly I had to have meaning. And there wasn't any, and a great crisis. And then I discovered, you might say, Christianity in a different way, because now it wasn't the smorgasbord, but it was me in the wilderness, alone in the dark night of the soul, and I had needs. Oh, okay. So then suddenly this Jesus appears. Well, that had been totally wrapped up in Christmas presents and red ribbons and nonsense, really. And I don't think I'd had any chance to kind of know anything about Jesus. But now it was the idea that God, instead of being remote, is entering into a human life for 33 years, and that life is experiencing everything: the sweat, the sexuality, the work, the oppression. Wow. So suddenly we're, involved in reality here. And on that basis, I left to Hollywood and entered the seminary, and my 44th anniversary is around this Christmas of having been ordained a priest. So to me, Jesus, I see, as about the most inclusive person who ever lived. When you get into the Gospels, think of all the people that society is despising, and Jesus is being very friendly, accepting. There is this unconditional love. And to me, that is a judgment on much of what I call churchianity, which is people going through the motions and playing games, but kind of wanting to keep Jesus at bay. And, that's the same principle that if Jesus kind of wandered back on a Sunday morning, an awful lot of churches might be quite embarrassed and quite put out and not quite know what to do with this, because in their neat little controlled pattern with a great deal of hypocrisy, this would be difficult. Of course, I was so active in the civil rights movement, and Martin Luther King particularly taught me so much. And then what I ran into there then was oppression. And here were the churches that were a part of it. The balconies where the slaves had been. There were churches in Michigan, into the early 60s, where blacks were not invited. or welcome. So what I'm saying here is when we come to Christianity, we really got a lot of dynamics going because we have a faith that we've accepted too much, too easily, without maybe even knowing it. And then we do have to confront this inclusive person, Jesus, whom we may never have known. Mm-hmm. And it's time to get acquainted. So as a gay man particularly, I've been through a lot of all this because, well, again, the church was judgmental and not offering unconditional love. And I had to go through that. And it was very painful. And when I came out, my books were burned by fundamentalist, quote, Christians. They're not Christians at all as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm. And I was unemployed, and there was nowhere to go, and a victim of enormous prejudice. I'm 75. Been married to Mark for 14 years. We're a gay family, and I'm very solid now about kind of who I am and what's going on. I don't play any games with anybody.
So how do you use that then to help people deal with what Denise was talking about in terms of, for better or for worse, this time of year is not only trivialized, but we have this sense that we're supposed to be happy, and we see so much commercialism, and we don't know where we belong. It's a very lonely time, and people try to find a place for themselves to celebrate Christmas.
Yeah. For example, in our family, we're an extended family, and a number of gays and lesbians are in it. A number of non-gay people are in it. That's a beginning, and then you move out from there. I think the answer here, Sheila, has got to be that you've got to get rid of the fantasy and the illusion and the nonsense and confront Christmas in what it is if you're not going to be lonely and have to take 10 drinks to buoy yourself up in some phony, idiotic way. Because to me, the fact that God has loved us enough to share our human life for the 33 years and then to die, and then to, in the Christian belief, to be resurrected and that have overcome death, this is an incredible message. But you've got to let it get through. It can't just be funny little mall Christmas carols and another eggnog and a lot of phoniness about it. And I think for a gay person particularly, I think one of our awful problems that we have in the gay community is that religion and gay are like oil and water. And that a lot of people have been so burned and so crucified, and there's been woundedness for so long, that a lot of people just start screaming. I mean, it's really very difficult. And I completely understand, and I've been there. But I think what we have to offer now is just to say that this is our faith and that we're not going to let bigots who call themselves Christians or religious right bother us or get in our way. As a matter of fact, a hope that I would have is that a number of gay people would kind of wake up, quit reacting, become proactive, and let's take over the churches. Instead of the churches having to be the enemy, let's move in and get rid of the hypocrites and the people who, in my opinion, aren't practicing any kind of faith at all. Who killed Matthew Shepard, the young Episcopalian? I would like to know the 2 men and the 2 women who, the men killed him and they were accomplices. Where did their parents go to church? What were they taught about gay people? What were they taught about dignity? Were they taught that God had entered into human life, that human life then is sacred, and that Matthew Shepard hanging there crucified on the damn, whatever the hell it was, the scarecrow, is sacred and is holy? Were they taught that? Or did they just say this was another queer and a faggot and some bastard homosexual that they had the right to torture. This, to me, is where we get real. My heart goes out, to Matthew. Because a young friend of mine, Jonathan Daniels, was also murdered in the civil rights movement when, to save a young black woman from being shot, he took the bullet and he died. This is where religion isn't some stupid little thing on a shelf, but it's more real than any politics ever thought it could be.
Well, I think that's the great power of it. And I, Phil, that's one of the reasons I think the first time I was invited to come to your house for Kwanzaa, knew very little about it. It was very moving. I mean, I didn't know where to put it in my own kind of awareness. Is it a religious holiday? Is it a cultural holiday? Of course, we could say the same thing about the Jews and the Christians as well. But tell us a little about Kwanzaa, because there may be a number of viewers that don't know much about it, but also sort of why it became a very central part of your own celebration.
Well, we've been celebrating Kwanzaa for 12 years. I've been doing that party for 12 years now. Kwanzaa is one of the only uniquely African-American celebrations. And it is it's a cultural celebration, although it is certainly viewed in the same realm as a religious celebration, partially because of the time of year. It began in the 60s, and it came out of an African-American experience connected with Christmas in a secular sense. Black folks in general are very, very religious people, and certainly there's a connection to the Jesus Christ in the Christmas celebration, but many of us experience Christmas itself in the gift giving and in the secular sense. That's a very, very big thing. And I think that's, in part, that's connected to dealing with poverty and dealing with a reason to be happy, and what in many times was a very against odds, particularly in the poor South and what have you. And during the 60s, those images, and well, not just in the 60s, still those kinds of images, did not include us, and to be a parent and to have to deal with children, and the Santa Claus was a white Santa Claus, and all the images, and the Barbies were white, and on all the images, didn't look like us. So where was our place in that? And so at a time when some folks were talking about black Santa Clauses, some folks were talking about black dolls for little girls, there was a group of folks who started to talk about, maybe what we need to look at is creating a cultural phenomenon that's rooted in who we are. And that's what Kwanzaa is about. It's about looking at how we strengthen our community. It's really rooted in community and family. And the celebration that I host every year is really tied to that. And it is, as you know, a very, very multicultural experience. There are folks from every walk of life, and there are folks who are gay, and there are non-gay folks, of course. There are lots of African Americans and folks who are not African American who come to celebrate with us, because at its core, it is about unity, it is about building community, it is about preparing a future place, and centered around children in many, many ways, and the lessons that children need to learn to become capable and compassionate adults.
It also extends over a number of days, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And each day, I remember you read a number of, something is focused on each day, a principle is focused on each day.
There's 7 principles, and again, there's a menorah, which is simple. It's similar to the Jewish holiday, and there's a candle that is lit every day to celebrate a different, and it's lit at sunset, there are 7 candles. There are 3 green candles and 3 red candles and 1 black candle. The green candles represent the land. The red candles represent the blood of the people, and the black candle represents the life of the people themselves. And the black candle is in fact used to light the green and the red candles. And then there's a connection to, as you talked about, the winter solstice, because there is, as a part of the Hanukkah altar, there are fruits and vegetables of the day that are to be on display during the entire holidays to show that our connection to the land. Now, for many African Americans, even though generationally we're removed to the land, but our experience here in this country is very, very much connected to the land.
Right.
You know, and it's one of the reasons why many of us are extremely appalled, you know, when folks talk about whether or not we belong. You know, and for example, the discussions that happen in my family around whether or not Jefferson's illegitimate children should be buried. Now in Monticello, now our discussion is, what do you mean? Now it wouldn't exist if it weren't for us. You know, who do they think cared for those grounds? And then for them to have the audacity to suggest that segment of the family might not belong. So that, that connection to the land is really, really very important. And for gay and lesbian folks, I think that the notion of Kwanzaa is kind of interesting, because in some ways, my experience as a gay man is no different than my heterosexual brother or sister or other siblings as they celebrate Kwanzaa. And that's part of the power of Kwanzaa, that it shows that in our humanity, we are all the same. That the things that I aspire to and pray about at that time of year are the same that my brothers and my sisters pray and think about and talk about with their children during that time of year. And then at the same time, though, just as gay and lesbian Jews may in fact be the personification of the light, black gays and lesbians are the personification of the unity, and that who are the folks that kind of step in when there is a need for an uncle to do this or an aunt to do that or what have you, and this year in particular, that particular message is particularly resonates with me because I am a new parent. I am raising my 2 teenage nephews. And that experience certainly will make this particular Kwanzaa an extremely special Kwanzaa for our family.
It's very, 14 interesting points, but your point about family, we don't really claim our place as much in the history of families. But what you said is absolutely right. It used to be, of course, the childless aunt, who often was the lesbian aunt, would be the one left to take care of the aging and failing parents, and it was simply assumed that you would do that. And in so many families where tragedy strikes to the parents of children, we essentially continue to raise them, and yet there's not a lot of acknowledgement of that.
And I think it's a mistake for us not to claim our families, or our churches for that matter. One of the things I feel very, very strongly about, and one of the things that was a part of my experience in coming out with my family, is that it never dawned on me that someone could take my family away. It's not possible. In fact, I said that to my parents. I said, those are the rules. That you have to love me. That's the rule. This is my family. Now, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to let anyone take my family away from you. And you can't take it away from me. You don't have that power. And similarly with my church and my faith, that the religious right can only take that away from us if we allow them to. No, those churches belong to us. No, you don't have to do anything to earn that right. I don't have to do anything to earn the right to be a part of my family. I was born into it. It was a birthright. And the same thing with my church. No one can take that away from me. And we don't claim it enough. I think we should. And I think that in many ways, people do to us what we allow them to do to us. Now, if it is not a part of the equation that you're allowed to exclude us, people find it difficult to exclude us. And that's whether we're talking about family or churches or communities.
But it's not easy to exclude us if we insist on it, but on the other hand, there are pains. There are enormous sources of pain. And I don't think I'm alone in thinking that this time of year sort of exacerbates it. It's not just the loneliness, it is the shoulds that come with these holidays. You should have family around you or be part of a family. You should be happy. I mean, people feel that there's something wrong with them psychologically because they're depressed during the holidays. When if they just looked around, they'd see half of everybody's depressed because they don't whereas their life is exactly the same. At this time of year, we're not happy enough.
Right.
You know, we're not loved enough, and it comes home to us, and you hear, you know, music in the elevators, and you see specials on the television or whatever. So I think
the winter solstice, which you were speaking of earlier, you're not going to be July 4th happy. I mean, let's face it. Right. So it seems to me that there's something there. That let's quit kind of play acting. We keep having these images that we've got to be. You know, I was thinking the other day, we look at a lot of old videos of movies because there's nothing on television, so you have to look at something. And the Cary Grant and Gary Cooper and Sidney, nobody ever aged. They're young forever. It gets us into a fantasy. Like, it is harder to be older, frankly, because I look in the mirror and I am older, but Gary Cooper never got older. I mean, we're in a lot of fantasy and illusion. And it seems to me one of the things is, like, if it's winter solstice, then let me be winter solstice. I don't have to play act, do I?
But about winter solstice really was, it had a happy ending every year.
Yeah, but to go through it, you
right,
got...
exactly. But you know, it's funny, when I first learned where Christmas trees originated, I mean, you know, that before there was celebration of Christmas, there was this concern that the sun was just never going to come up again because the days got shorter and shorter and shorter, and it looked as though the light would go away, which I think is the underlying reason for the festival of lights in every faith. And so the people, seeing that the pine tree was the only thing that lived through the winter in the Teutonic tribes, would go and hang offerings on the pine tree to the god that made it through the winter. Clearly, if that could, maybe it could help us do it as well. And I mean, and would put lights, candles there as a prayer for continuing light. And of course, we still do the same thing with absolutely no idea of where this all came from, as we do with all kinds of things like shaking hands and having birthday cakes and things that we have no idea where they
Except
came
we're more druids
yes,
than
right.
anything that we're representing supposedly, because with the tree.
Right.
Well, you know, one of the things that happens in my family, because the season is so full. For my parents were married on Christmas Eve, so we celebrate my parents' anniversary, and we celebrate Christmas, and we celebrate Hanukkah. I mean Kwanzaa. We don't celebrate Hanukkah. We celebrate Kwanzaa, and one of the things that we do as a part of that, and usually it happens with children. So we ask, what do we have to be grateful for this year? What happened this year that we have to be grateful for? Now, and I find that to be very, very useful as I think about it in terms of a winter solstice, because I think about it in terms that another year has passed. Now, what do I have to be grateful for? Certainly, as a gay man, and particularly in light of AIDS, that is certainly something that is booming. Quite frankly, as a person living with AIDS, one of the things I have to be grateful for is that I made it through another year. But in most times, there's a whole list of things to be grateful for, that this happened this year, or that happened this year, or this happened this year. Now, and in that context, there can be great celebration. And particularly for gay and lesbian folks, there's room for tremendous celebration, because our reality, we started at the baseline of the oppression. We know that. And so at the end of every year, no matter how successful we've been at it, we've survived that. We've actually gotten through the 8 days, and the light is still there against all odds.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and that's why that image of survivorship at least to Hanukkah is so strong and speaks so loudly to me, and I think is a message for gay and lesbian people. And I guess the thing that I always think about, I mean, I know I'm not someone who sits still too well, so I'm out and doing, and I know that there are people who do sit still very well. I'd like to learn a little bit of that. But it seems to me that there are some opportunities during this time of year for those who might be lonely or feel like they don't have family. And that would be to help our gay and lesbian kids. I mean, there are lots of kids on the streets. There's lots of kids in shelters. There's lots of ways to be a mentor and to make a family. And it would seem to me that this would be an amazing time of year to self-actualize, to use an old term, to get up and to do something. And to go out to you know, one of the many programs that serve our gay and lesbian youth, and to make a Christmas, to make Kwanzaa, to do something, to volunteer, to find a way to be of service. Not only does it get you out of yourself, which is important, I think, in helping to combat depression or sadness, but to be a little more proactive and to think about the ways in which, you know, not only are we grateful for our lives, but to also to help some people who really need it. And I think that's a very important component of, you know, the kind of the holiday season. I mean, it's important all year long, but especially, I think, at this time of year.
Well, I think you're right in that to get off your case and look around, it's the most selfish thing to do, of course, is to quit being self-obsessed and you're the center of the universe, and you know, to reach out. I would like to add the elderly to the children.
Yes.
I do the column for Modern Maturity magazine, which an awful lot of, 34 million readers over 50. So I'm conscious of aging because of that, and my own age. But think of the people who are old, and it is hard, and sometimes disabled, and not so sure of themselves, and in the youth-oriented culture, self-esteem is rather difficult. And gosh, a lot of people could go to that apartment, that room, get somebody out, go to them, bring them something, bring, you know, some laughter, some companionship, because wherever there's loneliness, the way to break up loneliness is sharing, it seems to me.
Well, also we are just getting back to a place of multi-generational celebration in our community. I mean, I could be wrong, but it seemed to me that for a very long time when we were trying to sort of reclaim some of these holidays or make our own celebrations, that many times it was our friends, and they were very much of a generation with us, and we didn't have children along there for a while. And then the baby boom essentially said, you know, wow, I could have had a kid. And so now a lot of people do, or by one way or another, or have to, or, you know, adopt, or take someone else's kids in a tragedy, or have our own. And so now we have children, and our parents, who may have not been the best people to us over a certain number of years, when they get sick, start to rely on us, and we're the ones who show up. So now they're back in our lives, and we have these celebrations now, I think, in the opportunity to make them multi-generational, which also
the older
helps.
people in the gay and lesbian community who aren't our parents, but are sitting alone.
But who are our parents?
Spiritual
Yes,
parents.
okay.
They are our parents.
Political
We haven't
parents.
accepted
They
them
are.
as our parents. We haven't said that. And I think we need to. And I don't want to overemphasize that, but I want to include it with the children, because I think in a too youth-oriented culture that's just so conscious, that that I think self-esteem is a very important word, and we've all had to go through that in so many ways, but a lot of older people also have to feel that they're discards and that they're not attractive to anyone, and they're going against the grain, and there is a little pride, I hope, there, but we sure make that difficult sometimes. And I just want to include in our community that instead of just the children, that we go the other route to the older, because that's a real rough ride for an awful lot of people, because you have ill health, you have a lot of health problems, and then a lot of people have financial problems. And the holidays is a time when we can focus, I think. I think the key is to get out of our own concerns and selfishness and just
Yes.
look around, don't you?
Yes, I mean, the culture doesn't want to let us, you know, with the bombardment and the emphasis on presence and consumer. But I think that's the real essence of really what this time of year is about, no matter how you end up celebrating it, and is the essence of learning to move beyond that. That's not to say you have to do away with it all, but to find that balance.
But I think
and to
that
make
there's
that.
potential there, and I think that it's happening. And I think that some of it is driven by HIV and AIDS. I know that I've been in a number of venues where people have ceremonially talked about people who are seniors in our midst, and I see the celebration that happens there. Now, and quite frankly, and I feel it, because there is a sense of hope. Now, and I know that I experience hope in two places. I experience hope particularly with seniors and the folks who have survived. You know, and particularly at a time over the last, decade or so, where so much of our lives was focused on the death and the dying. Now, and to see, people who are 50 and 60 and 70 and older in our community, that's a cause for celebration. And I think that there's a growing feeling about that. We haven't gotten to a point where we can articulate it as well as we might. And the other place is, in fact, what happens with new birth, and that phenomenon. And I know I am always moved when a friend of mine calls and wants to share with me, that what has been that she's pregnant and that she's going to have a baby, and that is such a moving experience for me, and has been for me, given the last decade and so. So that I think the ability to celebrate and to understand the magic that happens at the beginning of life, and happens with the maturity of life, is something that we can uniquely speak to in ways that other communities can't.
And I think these holiday times exacerbate the feelings. I don't know, it seems like things are bigger or more important, or you feel like you can be more in touch with it, feel a lot of love, or even going maybe once a year you're going to show up and be a volunteer for something.
Yes.
And now I'm not aware of whether a community organizations and centers and places where we would normally gather anyway, not in our religious organizations or places, are incorporating the celebration of holiday. Because again, for so long, I mean, it seems like we've rejected a lot that has rejected us. It's like, you're going to reject me, I'm going to reject you more.
That's right.
And I don't know whether we're doing these kinds of celebrations in a community way. I'm sure you'd be asked to participate. Is there stuff going on outside of the temples and the churches and just in our community based?
Well, I think there's an enormous sense of, as you say, that word aloneness, loneliness, because people feel it themselves. I remember in my own life as a gay kind of young man, searching and getting hurt and wounded and not knowing what to do about it, and particularly a few years ago when there weren't any magazines or papers and role models, and there just wasn't very much 30 and 40 years ago. There really wasn't. And I remember at Thanksgiving or Christmas, I saw them as do-gooder. That's unfair. But, they'd ask you to come to some, like there'd be a dinner and there'd be name tags. And everybody's kind of nice to you, but you don't feel any reality in it. And you have to play a role. Like, gee, thank you so much for inviting me. But I don't want to be here. Because this isn't, so what I'd do would be accept it and then at the last minute say I have a cold in New York City, and then I would go out and get a hamburger alone, and I'd go to a movie. I was happier. I didn't have to play act. I didn't have to act like the psalm, that wonderful line in the psalm, we were strangers in a strange land, and we had to sing their songs. I didn't want to sing their songs. So I think this is a part of our vestigial experience, I think, some of the pain. And I think we're freer now than we used to be because we've said who we are. We are a people, community, and we don't have to sing songs in a strange land anymore. Do we? I don't think we do.
No,
but we did have to.
Still, though, I think that feeling of strangeness, excuse me, that feeling of strangeness, gay and lesbian people experience it certainly invited to even a set of straight friends that will include us for the holidays, because, I mean, I used to make a Thanksgiving dinner and invite people who, quote, didn't have anywhere else to go, which made it sound like I was sort of the last resort for these poor people, which in a way, I guess, was how they thought of it too. So I totally understand that. But I think we'll always have that feeling when we have to, you were talking about building our own families, and we've talked about the made family, the adopted family, the chosen family, and yet that's not an easy thing to do, is it, Denise? I mean, we make it sound easy.
I don't think it is easy, and I think lives in the world today are very fast and busy, and lives change more quickly than certainly my parents' lives did. But I think that's really the challenge, and I think the challenge is not to feel like they're second best. That this is a good choice, to surround yourself with a group of people that you want to be with.
Want to be with.
Want to be with. That is a good thing. And those bonds, I think, can go as deep as any blood family, and sometimes deeper, and certainly more honestly sometimes. And I think that's really a good thing. And so I think the challenge is, though, not to feel like, oh, we're the leftovers because we had no place to go. Well, this is a wonderful place to go, a place where I connect on many levels, on a spiritual level, on emotional and intellectual levels, on a fun level. And to feel good about that is really, really important. I'm really blessed. I have not only my biological family, but we have a wonderful, extended, close family of friends for whom we celebrate all kinds of not only Jewish holidays, but kind of secular holidays as well, and they feed my spirit and my soul, and I don't feel like that's any second-class family. I think that's the challenge, though, is to make that, incorporate that into our being, and just to do it and be proud of it.
And I think that sometimes we think that it's a choice, and my mother said this to me a few years ago. When we were having a discussion about the question of chosen family and biological family. And although I was not saying this, I was not saying that I had to choose, but she was very clear. She said, I want you to know that you don't have to make that choice. That in fact you can have both of those, and one does not have to be in a hierarchical fashion. Now, granted, there are folks whom it may not be that simple for, but my point is that often our alienation from our families are based on expectations that are not realistic, and in fact expectations that we don't have of our chosen families, because there are things that our biological families don't accept. Well, there are things that our chosen families don't accept in us either. But what we do when our biological families don't accept those things, we cut them off. And as in the Torch Songs trilogy, the Harvey Feinstein character's mother says, it took you a long time to deal with this, and you expect me to reconcile it in 24 hours? Give me a break. You've been wrestling with this for 30-some years, and then you're going to cut me off because I can't deal with it in a matter of hours? Well, that's not fair. And so taking back our whole families, from the way I look at it, it's a smorgasbord. It's a buffet. And you pick what you like and you leave on the table the things that you don't like. And I think that that's true in chosen families and biological families. And during the season, it's an opportunity, to eat from the buffet and not have to go away hungry.
speaking of the buffet, I think that in the gay family, extended family of which I'm a member, that Halloween is a major holiday in a gay context. It just has enormous meaning. We decorated, and there was a bat up there and a snake, fortunately rubber, and just all sorts of stuff, and food, and a lovely meaning. And in a way, I think that we need, as gay people, to bring to some of the traditional religious holidays maybe more gay meaning that we can discover in ourselves and bring to them. Don't you think so?
Of course.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I really do.
Well, and there's also a great sense of play at Halloween, and
Oh, yes.
you know, and role playing in a way that we were to sort of encourage people to experiment, I think, with all of their fantasies. But it's also a gift giving time, although it's a little bit more demanded, I think, than the gifts at other holidays.
had
But
a
it's kind
great
of like
mask.
a birthday.
I had a great
I'll bet you
mask.
did, Malcolm. I'll bet you did.
And that was fun.
But you know, this thing about families is, it's always interesting to me because so many lesbians have their exes in their kind of extended families. And
So do gay men.
And gay men too, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's, I'm thinking about the people who, you know, they don't feel close to their biological family, and they don't feel that they've built a second family, and the whole thing becomes even worse because now we're talking about great choices of families. But I think what people learn as they get older, and I'm only, I think, 18 years behind you at this time, and I guess always, is our friends and ourselves are really a very, very, very important component of any family. Whether you're straight or gay, or you love your family, or they've thrown you out, or whatever, that they're just as good as, and sometimes, as you said, sometimes even better, and that you can collect people and they get along and they love you. It's just like, here's the ticket to my family. You have to love me and I have to love you, period.
And it's I think it's part of the spiritual journey, because all of those people add to the mix of who we are and bring their strengths. And I think if anything, for me, that at least for Hanukkah, and that the kind of feeling of the holiday season, if there is something like the holiday season, is that opportunity to take that into the mix and to make that those families that we celebrate with take their spiritual journeys into our own, and help that lead us on our own journey. And that enriches our life. I mean, that to me is really what it's about.
You know, there's also a certain amount of fear, though, isn't there, about knowing yourself?
Of course.
I mean, the Legend of the Minotaur was really about that, wasn't it? Because you get all the way through the maze, and you meet the monster in the middle, and the monster has your face.
Yes.
That was the legend. Or facing your lion, same thing. You had your own personal lion to face, and it always turned out to be you. And I think that's the other thing, that we tend to blame our loneliness. I'm not saying that isn't a real thing when we've been rejected, but sometimes say, this is not about me. This is about society hating me. And I think that's what you said. It's very important, Phil, to just reject that.
That's right.
Just take it.
The power that happens now when we do the work to find out who we are and to be okay with that now goes a long way in fighting the odds. And fighting the real obstacles that are out there, to fighting the real oppressions. I mean, I would not want to trivialize or minimalize or to say they're not there. They are there. But the power in knowing ourselves and loving ourselves and understanding ourselves go a long way in that battle. And without that, we're destined to lose that battle.
Well, we have, I think, a minute each to sort of end. Doesn't it go fast? I just think it does.
Fast, yeah.
What would you wish all the people watching this Kwanzaa?
I would wish people to celebrate who they are, you know, and to grab a hold of those things that are theirs, their family, however they define it, you know, their faith, however they define that, you know, and to hold on to that and to celebrate that, you know, as they go into this holiday season.
Malcolm, what would you wish the people watching for Christmas?
To give up perfectionism, because in a relationship or in life, it just defeats you. We're talking religion, and a lot of people are looking and saying they were oppressed, they're crazy, why would they be involved? Because we're not expecting perfectionism from anything, including religion. So I'd say get real. I would hope that people could kind of look in the mirror, get a sense of self, and go for joy. That's what I would wish. And that includes justice and service, incidentally.
I like that. Denise, what would you wish for Hanukkah?
For Hanukkah, which is Chag HaOrim, Festival of Lights, for me is to take and really celebrate and bring out, come out, let that inner light come out of whoever you are, and to let your inner self, your inner being, make and enrich and shine into our world. Too many of us keep that covered up, and I think that's really what Hanukkah in its core is about.
This little light of mine. Well, I want to thank you for joining us and wish everybody a very happy holiday, whichever you celebrate. Don't choose among them. I mean, we didn't. Celebrate them all. Celebrate yourself. The joy, the faith, the love, and in the next year, we hope that you will get used to it.